What makes a game good? The graphics? The gameplay? The immersion? Perhaps it lies in the memories we personally built along the way. Most will likely have a mixture of these answers when thinking about it. What about a series though? A standalone game is easily judged on its own merits, but a series can complicate things, because often, as time goes on, what once made a game series so enticing can be changed and altered to the point where an experience that had become so personal no longer feels that way. And if you want a more personal experience that will always feel that way, you should think about subscribing to the channel for more content like this. It will fill the hole in your heart. Fallout was the first RPG I ever played. Granted, the sequel, Fallout 2, was the first game of the series I saw and played a bit for myself, but the original Fallout was the first of its kind that I had ever played all the way through. Days spent staying home from school sick just to not have to get off the computer so I could experience more of the wasteland. Conversations monopolized by the world I had fallen so much in love with. Whenever I think about my past with the Fallout series, I always think back to my school days. Around the time the first game came out, I was about 11 years old, and I would play them regularly throughout my childhood. And the games became kind of like a comfort to me. I can remember being a bit of a problem child, but I wasn't mean, nor was I really doing anything wrong. I wasn't really doing anything at all, and that was the problem. I would use class time to socialize, and though the teachers enjoyed having me in their classes, I would turn out to be a pretty big distraction to the others. This led to a lot of time spent in ISS, or in-school suspension. It's pretty much detention for those not familiar with the concept, but during actual class hours. It was a pretty large room, and I was usually the only student in it for most of the day. Of course, a staff member was there, but other than that, I was alone and expected to sit quietly and could only leave to use the restroom. I can't begin to cover the amount of time that I actually spent there. This was during my middle school years, so 7th and 8th grade for me, and I must have spent probably over 200 full school days in this room, more than half of those 2 school years. Because I wasn't attending the classes and essentially didn't have work from them to do because I was just outright missing what was going on, I spent my time writing. One of the things that I wrote out in its entirety is the plot of the first 2 Fallout games. This writing has been since lost to time, but I remember spending days, weeks even, handwriting the plot in novel form, later presenting it to the detention staff who genuinely enjoyed the story. I just always had the Fallout universe in mind. I digress. The point being, Fallout has been vital to me for as long as I can remember. And I remember it all. I remember when Fallout was released. I remember playing Fallout 2 for the first time, falling in love with the setting, and almost wanting to be a part of the world it had created. But it doesn't take a fan as big as I am to see that the series has had a significant decline since its inception. This doesn't come as any major surprise. As I said, this happens with games. Not just games either, TV shows that we've loved for years, movie franchises, all of creative media. If it has had a long enough lifespan, it will likely change, and not always for the better when it comes to fans. In today's video, I want to look at the Fallout series as a whole and mark the good times and the bad, the high points and the incredible lows. What once was one of the most creative and thought-provoking RPGs of our lifetime has been reduced to a mass-produced live service and media conglomerate, ironically turning the Vault Boy, who was created as a parody of over-commercialization and marketing, into just that. Today, we are looking at the decline of Fallout. In 1997, Fallout would be released to positive reviews, though even this first entry was considered a bit dated when it came to various things. The isometric approach, the turn-based combat, and even the interface were found to be a bit behind in the times. This wasn't enough to give the game a bad score, just as a whole, the games that were coming out around this time were looking and feeling better and better, with games like Oddworld, Grand Theft Auto, Tomb Raider 2, and even Final Fantasy VII being released the same year. Fallout would still stand out amongst many for its gripping story and incredibly bleak approach to telling it. Following the path of the Vault Dweller, you would be tasked with finding a replacement water chip for Vault 13. Throughout this journey into the ruins of post-war America, the player would come across many settlements and characters with their own things going on. Fallout would give you the choice to shape these things with your actions, helping those in need or not. But once out in the wasteland, we learn that much more important things are afoot. The primary quest for the water chip can be completed, and by most standards you would think this is the end of the game. You've saved the vault, but not really. The reports you bring back have troubled the Overseer to say the least. Big armies of super mutants, seemingly being created from somewhere, have been ravaging towns looking for pure humans to dip into FEV vats, thus turning them into more super mutants. The The brains behind this plan, the Master, seems to be trying to purify the world by turning every human into one of these monsters to make some kind of master race. Fallout culminates with the Vault Dweller fighting the mutant army at Mariposa military base where they were being created. After blowing the base sky high, the Master becomes the next target, which can end in a few ways as well, most of the time with a fight. But always with the home vault of the Master and the cathedral above being blown to bits, though this could all be skipped by just accepting the Master's wishes and revealing the location of Vault 13, which ends in the player being dipped in FEV and the destruction of Vault 13 because Fallout gave you a choice. The original Fallout story is credited as one of the best of the series. Even if the game itself hasn't aged the best, it is most certainly the darkest and most bleak, as once everything is said and done and all the smoke is cleared, there is no happy ending for Fallout. You can risk your life to save the vault, you can spend hours helping everyone you meet, but it will always end the same. The Overseer will see you as a danger, worried others will want to take after you and leave the vault as well. You are a hero, but you must go back out into the wasteland. Fallout is about the journey, it always has been, and the original game shows this in spades. Again, met with high review scores and universal praise, this game would go on to inspire many of the game developers on the scene today. It's truly a classic, and at the time, seemed to not only sell well, but acquire a cult following. There is a universal charm that comes with the franchise, and people were picking up on this as early as the first title. The stage was set for a sequel, and Fallout 2 would not disappoint. Following in the original's footsteps, some would say a bit too much, Fallout 2 offered a continuation of the story from the first, set 80 years after the events of the previous game. Fallout 2 was met with favorable reviews and praised to be an improvement on the fundamentals of the first, with quality of life improvements and more varied quests to locate. Though the reviews were good, Fallout 2 would garner some criticism for roughly presenting the same formula from the original Fallout. Some would say that the light-hearted and humorous approach, though dark, didn't really seem to fit the vibe for fans of the first title. These things aside, Fallout 2 would go down as one of the best in the series, with most saying that its humor, charm, and atmosphere would define Fallout in the best possible ways. The story told through the main quest is one of the best the franchise has to offer. Even today, subsequent entries have either fallen short or taken a different direction altogether, failing to capture the same magic Fallout 2 did. Starting as a tribal, identified only as the Vault Dweller's grandchild from the first game, the player will pass the Temple of Trials in their village of Arroyo. This cements them as the Chosen One and seals their fate to be sent out into the wasteland to find the Holy Gek. This Gek acts as a terraforming device, equipped with many things to help settlements start from the ground up, as many, coming from the vaults, would need something like this to till the ravaged soil and begin to rebuild some sort of normalcy. Fallout 2 thrusts you into the waste much like its predecessor, with very few hints on what to do. Armed with the location of Calamith and a few items to help you survive, it will be up to you to hunt down the Gek by any means necessary. And you don't have long. The crops of Arroyo are dying, sickness is spreading, and the animals are dying off as well, mainly due to the most significant drought in the village history taking place at this time. Again, much like the first game, this primary quest is just the beginning of the journey. Once the Chosen One finds the Gek, the village shaman appears in their dreams to tell them that Arroyo has been raided by dark spirits. Going back to the tribe, we find it in ruin and the shaman is struggling for his life on the ground. Though the tribal mystic has an odd way of explaining it, the Enclave is what happened here. They showed up in vertebrates and raised the village, taking most of the tribals captive and killing the rest. This introduction of the Enclave was stellar. We saw them briefly before, but if you are following the quest in the traditional order, they just seem like some bad dudes. In the intro of the game, we see our first bit of the Enclave. The vault they are hitting is indeed supposed to be Vault 13, the player character's home from Fallout the First. The Vault Dweller made some waves for sure, and it shaped the wasteland. The Enclave is no different. They activated an all-clear signal to the vault, and the rest is history. Arroyo shared the same fate. This sends the Chosen One on a quest to not only find the Enclave's offshore base, but to put a stop to them before they can continue this type of behavior. After the best boss fight in gaming history, with Frank Horrigan, the best boss in gaming history, the Chosen One will blow up the oil rig and rescue the captives of Vault 13 and Arroyo from this nightmare. With the use of the Gek, Arroyo will recover and likely expand from this drought, and Wastelanders no longer need to worry about the Enclave attacking their homes. Fallout 2 does a great job of telling a story that is much bigger than the player. It takes what Fallout did well and improves on it. It truly feels like a sequel and in most cases outshines the first entry, not only in scope but in quality of life improvements as well. This keeps Fallout 2 widely in the running for one of the best in the series. If graphics were not a factor and turn-based combat didn't turn you off, Fallout 2 may very well be your favorite in the series, and the franchise starts hitting some bumps from here. Fallout Tactics Brotherhood of Steel would usher in a slew of gameplay changes and would be met with good reviews, with some saying that it is a perfect treat for Fallout and strategy fans alike. The game would even be nominated for Best Strategy Game in the 2001 Computer Gaming World Awards. Fallout Tactics does offer an enjoyable experience, though it is quite different from previous entries. The story follows that of a Brotherhood of Steel initiate and their journey to drive raiders, mutants, and all kinds of other things out of the area. The story will eventually lead to the Brotherhood getting access to Vault Zero. Fighting their way through robots and other nonsense, the Brotherhood will arrive at a confrontation with the Calculator, the game's main antagonist. In typical Fallout fashion, the game has several endings, ranging from destroying the Calculator to fixing it, allowing any number of fates in between. As a fan of the first two games, Fallout Tactics was a misstep for me. Of course, I had fun playing through some of the missions, and had a lot of fun doing skirmishes with my friends with LAN connections, but what made the Fallout universe stand out to me wasn't entirely present here. While I enjoy strategy games, when I am looking to Fallout, I'm looking more towards the RPG, single pro tag, massive story approach. So while Tactics was met with pretty good reviews, I would mark this release as when Fallout began to slip. Had Tactics been a one-time experiment, perhaps this wouldn't stand out as much, but Interplay planned to double down on this design with a sequel, Fallout Tactics 2, which would have seen more of the same, taking Fallout to this new direction that the mainline games weren't really touching on, but one of the lowest points of the franchise was just around the corner. Fallout Brotherhood of Steel would be the next release and would mark the first real decline in the series. The game was objectively bad, and it received mixed reviews on launch, with Eurogamer giving it a 3 out of 10. Critics marked poor level design and the excessive use of profanity as a step backwards for the series. Fallout had always been very nuanced with such things, and many thought it was just thrown at them in Fallout Brotherhood of Steel. Gameplay-wise, this entry was a complete departure from the Fallout series, changing the RPG-based mechanics and role-playing aspects to that of a run-and-gun shooter. Players could level up and spend points on boosting different stats, but it was a long way off from what we had seen in previous titles. The story also follows some Brotherhood of Steel members, with the player looking for their lost group. The journey will lead them from Carbon, Texas to a secret vault that ultimately ends with a boss fight against a giant blob of sentient goo. The main quest left a lot to be desired, and with the inclusion of odd things like Ball's energy drink and thus the removal of Nuka-Cola and modern metal tracks during boss fights, made this game feel very disconnected from the Fallout series. This was the first Fallout game to really tank with critics and fans alike, but it was setting the stage for the direction Interplay seemingly wanted to take Fallout. This almost certainly did not help the stock of the game series when Interplay finally did go under, but with plans to not only make a sequel to Fallout Tactics, but also a plan to make one of this game, it's pretty egregious. This is the first decline of the Fallout series, which would lead to its eventual death. Yes, Van Buren, the code name for the then Fallout 3, was in the works, and the story and gameplay do seem to bring Fallout back to its roots. But these sequels to offhand games in the series is a sign that Interplay may have wanted to change the direction of Fallout, for the worse. Even Van Buren itself saw some significant changes that may not have gone over well with people who just wanted a Fallout game, with the introductions to a giant robot chasing you across the map, spreading plague wherever you go, and a tactics-like companion system. It could have rubbed fans the wrong way altogether. The Fallout series would remain in the grave for years, eventually reaching a new height in its troubled lifespan. Bethesda would purchase the rights to make a Fallout 3 and later win the entire IP legally. Fans of the classic Fallout games were mixed, with some excited to see Fallout get the Bethesda treatment, move into the 3D realm, and become an even bigger RPG experience than it already had been. Still, some reserved that Bethesda wasn't right for the series, touting that the company would turn Fallout into Oblivion with guns. Fallout 3 was met with overall positive reviews. Speaking for myself, I enjoyed Fallout 3 immensely. Seeing it announced was a massive moment for me, as I thought I would never see Fallout again. I was incredibly happy with Fallout coming to the FPS RPG genre. The new perspective was welcome, and the setting of Washington, D.C. was an interesting and excellent choice to explore in the Fallout universe. Fallout 3's story covers the journey of the lone wanderer from Vault 101. After their dad leaves the vault, suddenly one day, they too make an escape and travel the capital wasteland. The main quest is to find your father and secure Project Purity, which promises to purify all the water in the surrounding area. The Enclave makes a sudden return and puts a halt to the project indefinitely, assuming control of the facility. This pits the Brotherhood of Steel and the Enclave in an all-out war, which is covered nicely in Fallout 3. This would mark the first time the Fallout series would receive add-ons, DLC in the form of new world spaces like Point Lookout, the Pit, a simulation of the war at Anchorage, and even a mothership of the Zayton aliens. with the last add-on adding a continuation of the main quest and a bigger fight with the Enclave, allowing the player to continue after playing the main quest, Broken Steel. These add-ons strengthen Fallout 3 considerably, making the complete package one of the best experiences in the series. The main story may fall short in places for fans, but these DLCs really add some much-needed flair and value to the game. Bethesda would license Obsidian for the next installment, which many think leads to the pinnacle of the Fallout series, New Vegas. Met with outstanding reviews, Fallout New Vegas seemed to fine-tune the formula introduced in Fallout 3, taking the game back to the roots of the series to the Mojave Wasteland. The story follows that of the Courier, once hired by the mythic overseer of New Vegas, Mr. House, to deliver a platinum chip. This device would be crucial in shaping the outcome of the Mojave. This makes the Courier a target for Benny, House's protege, who thinks he can use the chip for his own devices. The biggest news in the Mojave is the upcoming battle at Hoover Dam between the NCR and the Legion, two factions who have been at a tense standstill since the last fight. The Courier will shape this battle based on the decisions made throughout the game. Fallout New Vegas also hosted terrific add-ons. Like Fallout 3, they would add new world spaces to explore and in-depth quests to experience. The quality of the DLCs in the Fallout series thus far has been stellar. Fallout 3 has some great additions, but New Vegas went above and beyond to use the add-ons to tell some truly amazing stories, setting a standard for what fans would expect moving forward in the franchise. The second peak of the Fallout lifespan would follow as the hype train for Fallout 4 moved at speeds unthinkable by man. Bethesda would release Fallout Shelter at the announcement of Fallout 4. Fallout Shelter, Bethesda's solution to a Fallout mobile game, has grossed over $100 million by 2019 and remains one of the most popular apps available. Those numbers speak for themselves, and Fallout Shelter has received favorable reviews. If you go into it knowing what type of game it is, you stand to have a good time. Fallout 4 would mark the second major decline in the Fallout series. With an unstoppable hype train, the game was released to mixed reviews. Critically, the reviews were favorable, as significant improvements had been made to the actual gameplay, with combat getting a complete overhaul and level design seeing new heights. Fans would cite the lack of RPG elements, low roleplay value with the voice protagonist, and basic flip-flop of the previous story from Fallout 3 as the main quest for why the game was disappointing. Fallout 4 started in the pre-war, another issue fans were divided on. After being rushed to Vault 111, the player character and their family are cryogenically frozen. Sometime during this state, you become conscious long enough to see a shadowy figure shoot your spouse and kidnap your son before being put back into the cryogenic state. Eventually, the player will fully wake up as their pod is deactivated, and they will be free to explore the Commonwealth. Fallout 4 drives the narrative that the player wants to find their son, which some fans didn't exactly connect with. And yes, this is a spoiler warning for Fallout 4, so take that as your chance to click out if you don't want to hear how it all wraps up. We do locate our son and find out that he is now the leader of the Nefarious Institute, and has aged past us physically. Some were surprised by this twist, others claim to have seen it coming, but regardless, many felt that the main quest and lack of RPG elements left a lot to be desired with Fallout 4. Like the previous titles, this entry would feature add-ons, this time the bulk of which focused on the Workshop settlement building feature, with a few offering new world spaces like the Nuka World theme park and the island of Far Harbor. These DLCs were well received, with Far Harbor being praised as one of the franchise's best experiences. Fans again would be split on the Creation Club's inclusion, with many dubbing it paid mods. This service promised to add small, mini DLC types of experiences harmlessly into the game and wouldn't offer the same restrictions as standard mods, like the achievements being disabled, though the Creation Club has had its problems as well, as if one was to install all of it today and start a new game, major bugs appear that halt the process of the game, such as the door of Vault 111 not opening, Codsworth not starting the main quest, and Preston Garvey not interacting with the player. With all of that being said, the total package of Fallout 4 is one of the most enjoyable and replayable titles in the franchise. Bethesda making it easier to add and distribute mods has helped the lifespan of this game immensely, as the modding community surrounding Bethesda titles is one of, if not the most, robust and varied group out there. There is never a shortage of great mods to find for Fallout games, and Fallout 4 shines the brightest when tweaked with one of these creations. Bethesda's latest Fallout title marks the most significant decline in the series' history. With a disastrous launch and murky monetization attempts, Fallout 76 has been a proverbial shit show since the moment people got their hands on it. If you have listened to this video this far, you would have to understand how big of a misstep Fallout 76 is. This online venture with the Fallout universe was seemingly doomed from the start, as many of the associated products would leave more to be desired by customers. The game itself was riddled with bugs and nearly unplayable for some. It further watered down the RPG elements and exchanged compelling stories with fetch quests and grindy side jobs. Though many improvements were made with the Wastelanders DLC release, a lot of fans feel like the damage has already been done, either refusing to play it again or pick it up altogether. Critics cite jumping on bandwagons like the Battle Royale and the Battle Passes while offering a premium shop and a membership service is monetization overkill, and they would be right, as many people were put off by the overabundance and just stuck to playing previous Fallout games. The Fallout series has had a rough roller coaster of an existence, once dying only to be revived and thrust into the mainstream, and then brought close to the brink of death again by the very mainstream it now appeals to. Much like the Vault Boy transformation mentioned at the beginning of the video, Fallout has turned into a parody of itself. This video isn't to convince you not to like Fallout 76, not by a long shot. In fact, I think it's great when people can find enjoyment in video games, and 76 is no different. It's just to show the steady decline in the Fallout narrative over the years, and no, Bethesda isn't the only culprit. Interplay was well on their way to, quote, ruining the franchise, and I believe they would have if given the time. Sure, Van Buren looked promising, but the constant missteps like Tactics, a good game but hardly something to double down on for the series, and Brotherhood of Steel, a terrible game, filled with product placement and cringe humor, the future didn't look bright. I often look at Bethesda acquiring the IP as the absolute best thing that has happened to the series. They were able to steadily crank out high-budget, good quality, and memorable Fallout games, thrusting the franchise into the mainstream. Much like Interplay, Bethesda's tampering with the Fallout formula is now resulting in the game getting poor reviews, when that had been unheard of until now. So regardless if you like Fallout 76, this is an evident decline in quality when it comes to the series. The game currently stands as a shell of what it once was, a post-nuclear parody of one of the most superior gaming experiences of all time, a bulletproof series that just started to crack. And that is the decline of Fallout. Thank you for watching my video about the decline of the Fallout series, and if you enjoyed it, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more content like this. Helps the channel out a lot. I want to thank my patrons and YouTube channel members, and a special thanks to my biggest supporters: Kim Jong-un, Not Catchy, Stupendous Skellington, Hackerman, Fireflare, Alexander Cobb, Papa Swanson, Legendary Angel 94, Bill Scott Sheets, Thomas, Laud Have Mercy, Death 6199, Broadway, Edgy, and Primark Mustard. Thank you all so much for the support. I hope to catch you on the next one. It has been Mantis.
I gotta testify. Come up in the spot looking extra fly. For the day you die, you gon'